She slapped the judge over a $10 fine. Marlene, the infamous HOA Karen, had ruled the neighborhood with fear for years, but Judge Kimberly didn't flinch and knew exactly how to bring her down. Just wait till you hear how it all turned upside down and why justice finally won. In the arid heart of Arizona, tucked between sun-bleached strip malls and rows of identical stucco homes, lay the town of Dry Creek, one of those places where change moved slower than the breeze. It was a place where lawns mattered more than people, and the HOA wielded more power than the mayor. Residents walked their dogs in silence, avoided eye contact during board meetings, and lived by the unspoken rule, don't piss off Marlene Greer. She was the self-appointed Queen of Order, the HOA president for nearly a decade, and the undisputed champion of pettiness. Her reign was built on a mountain of anonymous complaints, late-night reports about recycling bins left too close to the curb, and an obsession with uniform grass height. The neighborhood called her Karen behind closed doors, but no one dared say it aloud, not to her face. Marlene didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. But on a Monday that began like any other, something cracked. Judge Kimberly Fletcher had presided over Dry Creek's municipal court for over 15 years. A former prosecutor with a gaze sharp enough to freeze lies mid-sentence, she was known for her cold, meticulous demeanor. Her reputation wasn't built on speeches or sympathies, but on fairness and consistency. Whether you were a teenager with a parking ticket or a businessman with a tax issue, Kimberly treated everyone the same, firmly, precisely, and without indulgence. That morning's docket was light. A handful of minor code violations, a late utility bill, a leash law infraction. Then came case hash 23447, HOA versus Marlene Greer, violation of Local Ordinance 3A, subsection 14, paragraph D, failure to maintain lawn appearance. Translation, her grass was 2 inches over regulation height. Marlene walked into the courtroom like she owned it, heels clicking like gunshots on tile, oversized handbag swinging at her side, lips pursed in permanent disapproval. She wore her signature beige suit, the kind that screamed authority, and her hair was lacquered into an immovable shell. Her eyes scanned the room with the dead calm of a woman used to being obeyed. She didn't sit. She stood, arms folded, chin tilted, as if already preparing for a confrontation. Judge Fletcher read the citation without looking up. Violation confirmed by photographic evidence and 2 written complaints. Standard HOA infraction. Fine, $10. Due within 48 hours. The words hung in the air like a guillotine. A $10 fine. Marlene's eyes twitched. Her mouth curled into a grimace of disbelief, then disgust. She took a step forward. The courtroom, a modest space with beige walls and tired air conditioning, seemed to contract around her. You could feel the tension shift. The bailiff straightened. A woman in the back gripped her purse a little tighter. "That's it?" Marlene asked, her voice low, brittle. "You're fining me? $10? Judge Fletcher didn't respond. She'd seen all types, angry fathers, reckless teenagers, people who'd lost everything and shouted through tears. But this was different. Marlene's fury wasn't emotional. It was entitled. "I am the HOA, Marlene hissed. "You don't fine me. I write the fines." Still, the judge remained silent, pen tapping once against the wooden bench before she looked up and said, as if closing a case on a dusty shelf, "You have 48 hours. Next case." And then it happened. In one swift, unhinged movement, Marlene stormed toward the bench, raised her hand, and slapped Judge Fletcher across the face. The sound was sickening, sharp, echoing, intimate, like a parent hitting a child in a church pew. The room froze. The bailiff jolted forward. A gasp rippled through the half-empty gallery. The judge didn't fall back, didn't flinch. She stood still, eyes locked on Marlene with terrifying calm. Seconds passed like minutes. The courtroom wasn't just silent. It was stunned. Marlene's breathing was heavy, nostrils flared, her face twisted in disbelief that she had actually done it. And not a soul moved, not until the judge said, in a voice colder than marble, "You just assaulted a sitting judge, Miss Greer." Marlene's eyes widened, not in fear but in defiance. Her lips parted to speak, but all that came out was a choking sound, half a scoff, half a breath. Two officers entered. She didn't resist, but her mouth kept moving. This is absurd. This is abuse of power. I am the community. But it was too late. The Queen of Dry Creek had fallen. Not from a scandal or a smear campaign, but from the weight of her own unchecked arrogance and a $10 fine she thought she was too important to pay. The video spread faster than gossip in a church parking lot, faster than a desert wildfire on a windy day. Within hours, clips from the courtroom security camera had blanketed social media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Every platform ignited like dry brush under a magnifying glass. A woman in heels, prim and polished, stepping forward and slapping a sitting judge across the face. No context needed, no caption necessary. The internet did what it does best. It watched, it looped, and it judged. But here's the twist no one expected. People weren't outraged at the judge. They didn't question the law, the system, or the $10 fine. They didn't cry government overreach, no hashtags for judicial accountability, no rants about freedom. Instead, the crowd turned, not slowly, not with doubt. They turned on her, Marlene Greer, the self-crowned tyrant of HOA regulations, the Karen of Dry Creek, the woman whose smile never reached her eyes, whose perfume lingered longer than her apologies, whose voice could flatten a barbecue in 5 syllables or less. For years, she'd ruled like a monarch in khakis, quietly terrorizing anyone who dared live with a little too much color, too much noise, or too much joy. But now, in one glorious instant of unfiltered rage caught on state-issued surveillance, her mask cracked, and the whole town saw what they'd only whispered about behind tightly drawn blinds, and they were furious. Marlene tried to spin it. She released a statement from her lawyer's email, claiming her personal rights had been violated, that the judge provoked her, that she felt emotionally unsafe and had acted in spontaneous civil resistance. On a local radio call-in show, she referred to the $10 fine as institutional extortion and called the judge's tone a psychological assault on taxpayers. She even went on a live-stream rant, pacing in her living room beside a faux marble bust of Thomas Jefferson, where she claimed the courtroom was a kangaroo court and accused the bailiff of looking at her with communist eyes. But it didn't land. Not this time, because Dry Creek remembered. They remembered the time she fined an 87-year-old veteran for flying a U.S. flag from his porch without pre-approval. The flag had belonged to his brother, killed in Korea. Marlene called it unauthorized decor. They remembered how she once reported a group of kids to the police for gang-like loitering. The gang? 3 boys and a girl, all under 12, bouncing a basketball in their driveway. Their crime? Cheering too loudly. They remembered the widow who had just lost her husband to cancer, the one who planted lilacs, his favorite, in a ceramic pot beside the door. Marlene gave her 48 hours to remove it or face escalating fines for unregistered ornamentation. The woman cried on her front step. Marlene walked away without looking back, so yes, Dry Creek remembered. They remembered every letter, every complaint. Every citation slipped under a doormat, like a snake under a doorframe. For years, they'd bitten their tongues. For years, they'd paid the fines, trimmed the hedges, silenced their dogs, and repainted their mailboxes to match the approved earth tones. For years, they'd suffered the silent dictatorship of one woman with a clipboard and a god complex. But not anymore. Now, it was out in the open. And it wasn't just the video. It was what it unleashed. People started talking. Neighborhood forums exploded. Anonymous usernames shared real names. Stories poured in like floodwater through a broken levee. Screenshots, citations, audio recordings, photos. One by one, residents told their truths, and for the first time, no one interrupted. No one dismissed them. No one said, "She's just doing her job," because now everyone could see what she really was, a bully dressed in bureaucracy, a tyrant in taupe. The public's rage wasn't loud, it was focused, controlled. The kind of fury that doesn't burn, it sears. And Marlene, she wasn't ready for that. Not for the glare of the cameras, not for the viral takedowns, not for the late-night segment that called her the $10 tyrant, not for the neighbor who posted a lawn sign reading, "I survived HOA Karen and all I got was this citation." The mask was gone, the power too. and for the first time in years, Dry Creek took a deep breath and started speaking without fear. The justice system doesn't blink when a parking ticket goes unpaid. It doesn't stir over neighborhood gossip or minor neighborly disputes. But when someone strikes a sitting judge, on camera, in court, on government property, it doesn't just blink. It roars awake. Assaulting a federal judge wasn't a headline. It was a national red alert. And in the era of live streams and instant outrage, Marlene Greer's slap wasn't just evidence. It was primetime content. The moment her hand collided with Judge Kimberly Fletcher's cheek, it stopped being a petty HOA case and became a symbol of entitlement, of unchecked arrogance, of what happens when power believes itself untouchable. But Marlene, she didn't flinch. She didn't reflect. She didn't apologize. She doubled down. Within 24 hours, she had retained a lawyer, not a seasoned litigator, but a YouTube-famous sovereign rights attorney named Blake Jensen, known more for viral courtroom tantrums than winning cases. He once sued a police department for asking his client to wear shoes. His firm's motto was literally, "Don't tread on my Wi-Fi." Marlene arrived at her first hearing like a contestant on a reality show. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors, a blazer 2 sizes too bold, and carried a handbag that looked like it cost more than her car. Her entrance was theatrical. She turned to the cameras, smiled, winked. She wasn't facing criminal charges. She was auditioning for a spotlight. And then, in a moment so surreal it felt scripted, she pointed at Judge Fletcher, the very woman she'd slapped, and shouted, "This system oppresses me. I'm a victim of bureaucratic abuse." The room went still. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Judge Fletcher, ever composed, said nothing. Her silence was heavier than any gavel strike. She didn't need to speak. She had evidence. And she had something else, a paper trail stretching back years. While Marlene played for cameras, Kimberly's attorney was doing what real lawyers do, building a case. Not just on the slap, but on the entire legacy of harm Marlene had inflicted during her HOA reign. He opened his file, and it unfolded like a roll of receipts. Dozens of complaints, signed affidavits, letters written in cursive by trembling hands, voicemails from elderly residents too afraid to testify in person, photos of notices pinned to windows, of crying children on doorsteps, of veterans folding their flags with silent shame. And statements, so many statements. One read, "She told me my rose bush looked too Mexican and issued a $50 citation." Another, "She asked if my autistic son could stay inside because his flapping was visually disruptive." All of it was now on record. And the people showed up, not just to watch, to participate. They packed the courthouse in numbers the bailiffs hadn't seen in years. Some wore homemade shirts that read $10 of justice in bold block letters. Others held up signs with her infamous citations. One woman carried a poster of her broken garden gnome with "Never Forgotten" scrawled across the top. But the most unforgettable moment? A teenage boy walked in wearing a full-body lawnmower costume, cardboard wheels, green-painted hoodie, and all. The crowd erupted. Even the bailiff bit back a grin. Marlene's lawyer objected, of course. "This is a mockery of due process," he shouted, flailing his arms. But it was too late. The trial wasn't just about Marlene versus the law anymore. It was Marlene versus everyone. Every quiet neighbor who'd been fined for a hanging plant, every single mom ticketed for leaving a kiddie pool out overnight, every grieving spouse reprimanded for hosting a memorial without prior HOA approval. In this courtroom, justice wasn't just being served, it was being celebrated. And Marlene? She still couldn't see it. She posed for photographers. She signed copies of her court summons like they were fan mail. She whispered to her lawyer mid-testimony, asking whether Netflix had reached out yet. But outside her bubble, the walls were closing in. Not just legally, but socially, morally, culturally. The town had found its voice, and they were using it, not with torches or pitchforks, but with lawn signs, t-shirts, and a very committed teenager dressed as landscaping equipment. And Judge Fletcher? She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just let the system do what it was built to do. Slow, deliberate, unflinching justice. Let me know when you're ready for the next scene in this takedown saga. Marlene Greer still believed she'd walk away untouched. Even now, with the full weight of the justice system pressing down on her, she wore the same smug smirk, the look of someone convinced that rules are for other people. She held her head high in court, adjusted her collar like it was opening night, and whispered to her lawyer between testimonies as if planning a victory dinner. She thought this was all temporary, a scandal to be outlived, a little PR storm she could outlast with the right spin. But what she failed to grasp, what she refused to accept, was that this time, the system she had once manipulated was now turning inward, trained on her like a microscope focused on a parasite. The prosecution wasn't theatrical. It didn't need to be. The law was the star here, and it spoke in quiet, unforgiving language. Marlene Greer had been formally charged with 3 criminal offenses, each as surgical as it was damning. Count 1, assault on a government official, a felony under both state and federal statutes, caught in high-definition video, corroborated by 2 bailiffs, 3 audience members, and a courtroom transcript. No ambiguity. No, he said, she said. Just a slap heard across the county and a mountain of irrefutable proof. Count 2, threatening the judiciary. The moment she stepped toward the bench with hostility and delivered a physical strike, the law recognized it not just as violence, but as a targeted threat against a public official in the execution of her duty. It wasn't just an assault. It was intimidation by force. Count 3, perpetuating a hostile civic environment. Obscure, yes, but a real. A rarely invoked clause in the municipal code that defines a pattern of harassment, coercion, and psychological harm enacted by a civic actor under the color of administrative authority. And Marlene? She fit the definition like a tailored suit. Each charge carried a maximum sentence of 5 years. Her attorney laughed off the 3rd count at first, calling it a political stunt. But that laugh died quickly once Judge Fletcher's legal team presented the case file. It wasn't just a binder, it was a war chest. Video evidence from the day of the assault, yes, but also hours of home security footage showing her stalking properties, knocking on doors late at night, leaving unsigned citations stuffed under windshield wipers like ransom notes. There were voice recordings where she threatened a mother of 3 with legal action for installing solar lights. An email chain where she mocked a disabled veteran's handwriting while rejecting his appeal. A signed HOA memo recommending monitoring of certain residents for excessive emotional display. And then came the expert testimony. A licensed forensic psychologist took the stand with a quiet, unnerving calm. He had never met Marlene prior to the mandated evaluation. No bias, just observation, notes, and diagnostics. What he described wasn't shocking to the town, but it was now official. Marlene Greer exhibited clear signs of narcissistic personality disorder with malignant and aggressive traits. Her behavior fit clinical criteria for chronic control fixation, inflated sense of superiority, retaliatory conduct toward perceived slights, and marked absence of empathy. She didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them. The courtroom fell silent as he read his conclusions. Not dramatic silence, cold, clinical silence. A quiet so complete, it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Even Marlene, for once, stopped moving. Her fingers, previously busy folding and refolding a tissue, went still. Her lawyer leaned forward, but didn't object. There was nothing to object to. The prosecution ended with a statement as sharp as a scalpel. This isn't a woman who lost control once. This is a woman who spent years building a world where she could control everyone else. The slap wasn't an accident. It was the final expression of a long, calculated pattern, and that pattern ends here. Marlene didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But for the first time, her eyes stopped scanning the room for allies. There were none left. By the 4th hearing, the courtroom had settled into a rhythm. Daily waves of evidence, testimony, the quiet clack of keys from court reporters, and the dull sigh of fluorescent lighting humming above the heads of people who'd waited years to see Marlene Greer sit in a place where she didn't hold the power. But if anyone thought her posture would shift under pressure, they were mistaken. Marlene still walked into the room like she was entering a hotel she planned to leave a bad Yelp review for. Her blazer was crisp, her lipstick militant, and her voice, when she chose to use it, was laced with theatrical exhaustion, as though the trial itself was an inconvenience to her very important life. She'd taken to bringing a small stack of note cards with her, flipping through them like she was preparing for a TED Talk. But what she didn't understand, what she refused to understand, was that this courtroom wasn't her audience. It was her reckoning. She took the stand again that morning, with her YouTube lawyer seated beside her, still nursing a black eye of public opinion. The gallery was packed tighter than ever. Even the air seemed thicker. Journalists scribbled. Former HOA victims watched like hawks. And the judge, ever unreadable, perched behind her bench like a stone lion, watching a particularly stupid antelope. The prosecutor stood. Miss Greer, he began, voice steady but sharp. You've stated multiple times that this incident, this slap, wasn't an assault. That it was, in your words, a reaction to being emotionally cornered. Marlene sat up straighter, her hands folded primly in her lap. She took a breath and turned slightly toward the jury, always playing to the room. She humiliated me, Marlene said, pointing, not at the prosecution, but directly at Judge Fletcher. She made it personal. That fine, that tone. It wasn't about the law. It was about putting me in my place. That's what this has always been. There was a murmur in the courtroom, barely audible, like a wind ruffling dry leaves. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. So, to be clear, he said, flipping a page of his notes with the casual flair of someone who already knew the answer, you're stating under oath that the judge humiliated you and that the incident was personal? Yes, Marlene snapped. Absolutely. I see. Then just one clarification. The prosecutor stepped forward, just enough to let his words hang in the air. Does that mean the slap was personal as well? There was a pause, a long one. The kind that doesn't break, it shatters. Marlene blinked. Her lips parted. And then, because she couldn't help herself, she leaned into her own drama. No, it was a protest, a symbol of defiance. And that was it. The dam broke. It started with a snort, quick and involuntary from the second row, then a stifled laugh from someone near the back, and then the room, the entire room, erupted. Laughter rolled through the courtroom like a wave, crashing against the walls, filling every corner. Not the polite kind, not a chuckle. This was gut-punch comedy, unfiltered, exhausted, and glorious. Even the bailiff, a former Marine with the emotional range of drywall, cracked a grin. The court stenographer actually stopped typing to wipe her eyes. Marlene froze. Her face shifted, struggling to contain the fury. Her lips twitched. Her fists clenched the fabric of her skirt. She looked to her lawyer for help, but he had dropped his pen. Literally. It lay at his feet, rolling lazily across the courtroom floor, almost symbolic in its defection. For a full 10 seconds, the chaos reigned, and then, as if sensing the perfect moment, the laughter died down just enough for silence to settle again. All eyes turned to the bench. Judge Kimberly Fletcher hadn't spoken a word. She hadn't moved, but then, barely, her lips curved. Just enough, just for a second. A smile, so slight it might have been imagined, so brief it could have been a twitch, but it was there, the first, the only, the last. Marlene saw it, and that single moment, infinitesimal but deadly, was the loudest judgment of all. Let me know when you're ready for the final strike. By the second week, the courtroom was no longer a legal battleground. It had become a living monument. The gallery filled with those she once silenced. Retirees, teachers, veterans, students. They didn't chant or shout. They showed up, sat down, wore shirts that read, "We are not the grass beneath her heels." They were calm, but their presence roared louder than words. Public testimony opened, and that's when the stories came. One man spoke of being fined for hanging wind chimes his late wife loved. A single mother recalled being threatened over her son's toy basketball hoop. A teacher said she was cited for excessive seasonal display after decorating for Thanksgiving. Each story peeled back another layer of the persona Marlene wore like armor. Then Richard Collins stood, a Vietnam vet, navy jacket, firm voice. "My son died in Afghanistan," he began. "I planted roses in front of our porch for him. My wife said they helped her sleep." He paused, quiet. "Marlene fined me, said the flowers violated code. I asked for leniency. She said, and I quote, 'Personal grief doesn't override policy.'" He looked straight at her. "I paid the fine. I pulled up the roses. My wife cried for hours." Silence. I'm not here for revenge. I just want it said. Today, finally, someone saw her for who she is, and someone said, enough. No one clapped, no one dared, but the silence that followed, that was louder than any verdict. Even Marlene didn't speak. For once, there was no comeback, no smirk, just a woman shrinking in a chair too big for her ego, while the town she tried to rule stood taller than ever before. The jury didn't hesitate. After less than an hour, they returned with a clear, final answer. Guilty on all counts. No emotion, no drama, just the undeniable weight of truth landing like a closing vault door. But the harshest blow wasn't the verdict. It was what came next. Judge Fletcher's voice was calm, almost soft, but her words cut with surgical precision. Marlene Greer, she said, you are sentenced to 2 years of probation, mandatory psychological treatment, and a lifetime ban from holding any civic, public, or administrative position. The room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. Silence said enough. For Marlene, the sentence wasn't about time. It was about identity. She didn't just lose a case. She lost her purpose, her control, her illusion of authority. And then came the final blow. The HOA was dissolved. By city order, her precious board was shut down, the bylaws erased, fines canceled, residents freed. No debates, no delay, just a notice. HOA administration is hereby terminated, all citations null and void. That was it. No more meetings, no more warnings, no more power. She walked out of court that day a free woman, technically, but stripped of everything that once made people obey her. No more fear in their eyes, no more whispers when she passed, just cold indifference. For years, she ruled Dry Creek with rules, threats, and paper citations. Now, she was just another name in a file. No title, no clipboard, no one left to command. And in a way, far deeper than prison. That was her real sentence. After the sentencing, Judge Kimberly Fletcher exited the courthouse not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of what quiet strength looks like. She didn't rush past cameras. She didn't hide behind a statement. She stepped into the sunlight with the same composure she had carried through the entire trial. The press waited, mics out, voices ready. And someone finally asked the question that had been circling since day one. Judge Fletcher, how do you feel after being slapped in the middle of your own courtroom? She didn't hesitate. She didn't dramatize. Her voice was steady, even warm. It was a reminder, she said, a reminder of why I chose justice. Because sometimes, even over something as small as $10, a person reveals exactly who they are. That was all. No bitterness, no performance, just truth. The town heard those words, and something shifted. They didn't throw a parade. They didn't demand revenge. They did something better. They gathered. That weekend, in the park just across from City Hall, the residents of Dry Creek came together. Not to protest, not to scream, but to celebrate the quiet return of dignity. They brought folding chairs, lemonade, homemade cookies. Families rolled out picnic blankets. Children ran barefoot through trimmed grass that, for once, didn't need to be exactly 3 inches high. There were signs, playful, proud, healing. $10 well spent. We are not her lawn. Long live roses. Some wore cardboard judge robes over t-shirts. Others pushed old lawnmowers down the sidewalk like parade floats. One group even planted a rose garden near the fountain, naming each bush after someone Marlene had fined. It wasn't about mocking. It was about reclaiming, because fear was gone. That cold hush that once followed her name, Karen from the HOA, had vanished. Neighbors no longer avoided eye contact across driveways. Mailboxes didn't tremble at the sight of official envelopes. Sprinklers ran freely, kids chalked the sidewalks, and porch lights flickered without inspection. The town had exhaled. And maybe the most remarkable part, no one was asking what punishment Marlene had received. They didn't care about the legal language, the years, the fines, the therapy. That part was over. What mattered was what came next. The realization that justice didn't need to roar. It could whisper. It could walk with calm footsteps, wear glasses instead of armor, and sit quietly behind a bench while storms raged around it. And when the moment came, it could stand, speak softly, and still be heard. That's what Kimberly Fletcher had done. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't struck back. She had simply stayed still and let the truth come find her. And for that, for her patience, her restraint, and her refusal to stoop, the people thanked her not with speeches, but with laughter, sunlight, and lawn chairs. Because in the end, this wasn't about one slap. It was about every quiet injustice that had piled up behind HOA memos and thinly veiled threats. It was about the weight of control being lifted off an entire neighborhood. And it was about remembering that no matter how small the incident may seem, even a $10 fine can tell the world exactly who someone really is. Justice still exists. And in Dry Creek, under rose bushes and cardboard robes, it finally bloomed.